A CEO laughed as his wife got left with nothing. The judge's stamp hit the decree hard enough to echo, black ink spreading like a bruise across official paper. Caleb Mercer's shoulders rolled back, mouth pulling wide. Victory looked like teeth. The camera phone in the third row caught it all. His grin, the posture of a man who just won something he thought he deserved to keep. Ever seen someone lose everything and stay calm? Noelle didn't flinch. Her hands rested flat on the table. No trembling. No tissue crumpled between her fingers. She wore gray, not mourning, just done with color. Her eyes stayed forward while the room whispered behind their palms, waiting for her to cry or scream or beg. That calm can be a warning. The stamp ink smelled sharp, like chemicals trying to erase handwriting that used to say forever. Noelle breathed it in once, held it, let it go. Caleb glanced at her mouth, quick, hungry, like he was remembering a version of her he used to touch in private, the one he'd never get close to again. She caught the look and turned her face 1 degree to the left, shutting him out with geometry. Welcome to the new year, where some people start fresh and others start bleeding. Stay to see why he signed his own downfall. Comment below, broken or planning? Outside the courtroom, Caleb's phone lit up like something caught fire. He checked the first notification, bank alert. Then the second, properties flagged for review. The third one made his thumb stop scrolling. CFO unreachable. All calls forwarding to an automated message he'd never heard before. His driver stood by the town car, door already open, waiting for the man who always knew what to do next. Caleb's hand hovered over the screen, smile fading into something tighter. Noelle walked the opposite direction, heels steady on marble that felt too clean for what just happened. She didn't look back. Not once. Her phone stayed in her bag until she reached the bathroom at the end of the hall, the one with the broken lock that made privacy feel temporary. She finally pulled it out, checked one message, and let her face change where no camera could catch it. If the money behind his empire was never his, who was he really married to? The Austin Hurricane Relief Gala smelled like wet carpet and money pretending to care. Noelle Hayes stood near the service hallway, still in her volunteer shirt, hair stuck to her neck from hours of hauling boxes, while donors posed for photos in clean shoes. She'd slipped out of the ballroom before anyone could thank her with a speech she didn't need. Caleb Mercer found her there, leaning against the wall like he'd been looking for something real all night. He didn't offer money, he offered his jacket. She stared at it, then at him, trying to figure out what kind of game required props. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know." He didn't pull it back. The hallway was narrow, warm from the kitchen exhaust and bodies that had been working instead of networking. His cologne mixed with rainwater and the cardboard smell of donated supplies stacked too close. Noelle crossed her arms, refusing the jacket and the script that came with it. "Charity optics," she said, not mean, just tired. "You show up, hand out coats, get your name in the program." He smiled, not offended, just patient. "You're hiding behind pride because it's easier than admitting someone saw you." That line landed. Not because it was smooth, but because he said it like a buyer studying something valuable, deciding whether it was worth the cost. Noelle felt seen, and she hated that she liked it. He handed her phone back. She didn't remember him picking it up from the supply table. His fingers grazed her wrist when he passed it over, warm and deliberate, and her breath didn't stay steady. She pulled away fast, clutching the phone like it was evidence. "My flight leaves soon," she said. "Then let's get coffee now," Caleb said. Not sometime, now. Not a question he'd let her avoid. If she let him in, she risked the independence she'd built alone. If she didn't, she'd lose the one person who matched her fire without trying to own it. The choice felt too big for a hallway that smelled like cleaning solution and rain. "One coffee," Noelle said. "No promises." He nodded once, like he'd already won something she didn't know she was betting. That night, after her flight landed, her phone buzzed. His text was short. "I found what you don't want anyone to know." The Greenwich mansion looked perfect in every photo. White columns, curated gardens, windows that reflected clouds like the house was too expensive for weather. Noelle learned the floor plan like a map, counting exits, watching when staff came and went, noticing patterns in a house that felt designed instead of lived in. The air conditioning ran cold even in summer, like comfort had to be controlled. She found the first odd wire transfer 3 months after the wedding. It showed up on a shared account, labeled with initials that didn't match anyone she'd met. When she asked, Caleb explained it smoothly, too smoothly, his voice calm and his hands busy with his phone, dismissing her question without making it feel like dismissal. Her stomach dropped, but she didn't push. Not yet. At night, their bedroom felt like a stage. Caleb wanted affection on his terms. Public kisses that looked effortless, private moments that felt rehearsed. He'd reach for her like he was proving something, heat without safety, closeness that never quite landed as intimacy. Noelle learned to respond the right way, to perform happiness so well she almost forgot what the real version felt like. The late-night board calls started soon after. Caleb locked his office door, his own door in his own house, and spoke in a voice she only heard through walls. She'd stand in the hallway sometimes, listening to tone instead of words, learning the rhythm of secrets. A big charity weekend was coming. More photos, more smiles, more strangers congratulating them on a marriage that looked better from far away. Money wasn't just money in this house. It was power, and power was the only language Caleb respected. Noelle started a private log on a device he didn't know she owned. Dates, times, transfers, names. She wrote carefully, storing each entry like evidence she hoped she'd never need. Then she saw a name on a document left open in his office. Dylan Klein. She'd never heard it before, but something about the way it appeared, highlighted, circled, starred, made her take a photo before Caleb came back. Caleb's calendar never matched his schedule. Meetings, he said, were at the office happened somewhere else. Calls he claimed were with investors lasted too long and ended with laughter that sounded personal. Brielle adjusted his tie one morning before a breakfast meeting, her fingers moving with a familiarity that felt practiced, intimate, wrong. Noelle watched from the staircase, silent, invisible in her own home. Brielle didn't look up. She didn't need to. She already knew Noelle was there. The speakerphone call came later that week. Noelle was in the hallway outside Caleb's office when she heard Brielle's voice float through the cracked door. I already handled her. Noelle's hands shook. She forced them still, fingers curling into her palms until her nails left marks. Brielle's perfume lingered in hallways Noelle had just walked through. Expensive, floral, territorial. It clung to the air like a claim, a reminder that someone else moved through this house with permission Noelle never granted. They passed each other once in the kitchen. No words, just eye contact, long, steady, dangerous. Jealousy without sound. Brielle smiled first, the kind of smile that knows a secret and plans to keep it. When Noelle asked Caleb later, he didn't raise his voice. He never did. He just tilted his head, softened his tone, made her feel paranoid for noticing what she saw. Gaslighting worked best when it sounded like concern. A prenup review meeting appeared on the calendar with no warning. No discussion, no explanation, just a time and a law firm address. If Noelle accused him with no proof, she'd become the unstable wife in every conversation that mattered. She copied files to a hidden drive that night. Bank records, emails, calendar screenshots. She hid it off-site, somewhere Caleb would never think to look. Her phone buzzed the next morning. Unknown number. One line. Stop digging. He's not the only one watching. The conference room water tasted metallic. Noelle's throat stayed dry anyway. She sat across from attorneys who spoke about her life like it was a contract, not a marriage. Clauses for infidelity, stipulations for silence, penalties for public embarrassment. Noelle didn't cry. She asked questions instead. Specific ones. The kind that made lawyers glance at each other and adjust their papers. What happens if I refuse? She asked. The lead attorney cleared his throat. The offer changes. She realized then that the agreement was designed for humiliation, not protection. Every line was a trap dressed as fairness. Sign and lose publicly, fight and risk being buried privately. Caleb sat beside her, calm, controlled, pushing for a signature with the same tone he used to order coffee. His team said it plainly, sign today or the offer changes. If you've ever signed something with your heart screaming no, comment, I understand. Her attorney leaned close, voice barely a whisper. Fighting may trigger retaliation. Rage burned in Noelle's chest, tight and silent. She smiled politely while her lungs felt like they were closing. She thought about Austin, the hurricane gala, the hallway, the moment Caleb slid the ring onto her finger with soft words and warm hands. The contrast with this cold room made her stomach turn. Desire had turned into disgust. She signed. Calm, controlled, pen moving steady across the page. She wanted him confident. She wanted him to think he'd won. As they left the building, Noelle noticed a janitor cart in the hallway. Same man she'd seen twice that week, always nearby, always watching like he was waiting for a signal. His eyes met hers for half a second before he turned back to his mop. Caleb walked ahead, already on his phone, already moving to the next win. Noelle stayed one step behind, silent, planning. Caleb's phone wouldn't stop buzzing in the back seat. Each vibration felt like a punch. The screen lighting up with names he couldn't ignore and alerts he didn't want to read. His driver glanced in the rearview mirror, voice careful. "Sir, what do you want to do?" He expected the victory lap. Press calls asking for statements, cocktails with men who wanted to be seen near power, the kind of dominance that made strangers step aside when he walked into rooms. Instead, the phone kept screaming. Bank alerts hit first. Accounts frozen pending review. Then properties flagged for audit. Lenders calling back loans he thought were settled years ago. His CFO's line went straight to voicemail. Not the usual assistant deflection, but total silence. Midtown traffic horns blared around the car, mocking him with noise he couldn't control. The leather seat felt cold against his palms, too smooth, like everything expensive suddenly turned slippery. Caleb laughed once. Sharp, too loud, because fear always showed up as arrogance first, before his brain caught up to his body. "Take me to the office," he said. "Now." He stormed through the glass tower lobby, past security who looked away too fast, into an elevator that moved too slow. When the doors opened on the executive floor, he saw them. Agents in plain suits, sealing drawers with tape, cloning hard drives like his entire life was evidence. If this was federal, he lost his empire. If it was personal, he lost his reputation and his freedom. Either way, the walls were closing. His counsel's text came through while he stood frozen in the hallway. "Say nothing. They already have something." Caleb's mind flashed to the last time Noelle touched his tie. Her fingers gentle, her eyes hard, adjusting the knot before a breakfast meeting like she was preparing him for war. He'd mistaken her care for loyalty. Heat twisted into resentment in his chest, and he hated that he still remembered how her hands felt. He turned toward the service hallway, the one employees used when they didn't want to be seen. The janitor, he'd noticed him twice near sensitive meetings, always in the background, always too close to conversations that mattered. Caleb found the sign-out sheet at the service desk, flipped through pages with shaking hands. One name appeared on executive floors more than any maintenance worker should. Dylan Klein. Badge access showed he'd been everywhere, boardrooms, private offices, even Caleb's personal floor. Why does a janitor move through the building like he owns it? Noelle stepped into a quiet boutique restroom 3 blocks from the courthouse, locked the stall, and finally let her face change. Her jaw unclenched, her shoulders dropped, her breath came out in one long shake. She'd held that mask for hours, calm, controlled, untouchable. And now alone, she could afford to break for 30 seconds. Her rule was simple. Never break in public, never beg, never give him the reaction he could use against her later. Tears were weapons in the wrong hands. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, one line. "If you want the truth, stop going home." Noelle's hands smelled like courthouse sanitizer, sharp and medicinal. The mirror lights made her look too awake, too aware, like her face couldn't hide what her body already knew. Relief hit first. Someone was offering answers. Then anger followed, because relief meant she'd been waiting for someone to save her, and she hated that feeling. Her attorney had warned her on the courthouse steps, voice low enough that reporters couldn't catch it. If he thinks you're winning, he'll try to hurt you where it doesn't show. If Noelle moved too early, she became the headline. Bitter ex-wife ruins powerful man. If she moved too late, evidence disappeared into shredders and offshore accounts. Timing was everything, and she was running out of safe moves. She spotted the same sedan twice on her way to the restroom. Dark windows, engine idling, driver who didn't look at his phone. Someone was already following her. Noelle's mind flashed to Austin, to the hurricane gala, to the kiss she never finished. Caleb's mouth had been close, her pulse loud in her ears, and she'd chosen control over comfort, pulling back before the moment could own her. She'd known even then that giving in meant losing something she couldn't name. She opened her phone, hands steady now, and typed one line, "Tell me where." The reply came fast, too fast, like someone had been waiting with their finger on the screen. An address appeared, Caleb's company service entrance, the one employees used to avoid cameras. Why would the person offering truth meet her at the place where Caleb's secrets lived? Brielle looked Caleb straight in the eye and said, "You can threaten people all day. It won't fix what's coming." She'd lived close to power long enough to know when power was bleeding out. The signs were everywhere. Agents in the hallways, calls going unanswered. The way Caleb's voice climbed half an octave when he tried to sound calm. Logan Pierce's call came through while Caleb was mid-rant, pacing his penthouse like a caged animal. Brielle answered in front of him, voice clear, no apology. "I'll be downstairs in 5, she said. The penthouse smelled like expensive whiskey and panic. Caleb had poured 3 drinks and finished none of them. The elevator chime sounded too cheerful for the moment, like the building itself didn't understand what was collapsing. Caleb grabbed for control the only way he knew how, voice low, teeth tight, stepping into her space like proximity was power. Humiliation was his trigger, the thing that made him dangerous. "You walk out that door, you're done," he said. Brielle didn't step back. "I've been done. You just paid too well to notice." She'd been saving copies of things Caleb assumed were invisible. Wire transfers with notes he never read. Calendar appointments that didn't match his public schedule. Messages he thought disappeared after 30 seconds. Loyalty only worked when the ship stayed afloat. If Brielle flipped, Caleb's private life became evidence. If she stayed, she risked being the person they blamed when the story needed a villain. She'd watched powerful men throw assistants under buses before. It was always safer to jump than to wait for the push. Boots echoed in the hallway outside. Agents moving through the building floor by floor, sealing rooms, collecting devices. Time was gone. Caleb stepped closer, close enough that the air between them held every secret they never said out loud. The power exchange was charged, physical, dangerous. He wanted her to blink first. She didn't. Brielle walked to the elevator, calm and fast, choosing survival over loyalty because survival was the only choice that mattered. Logan stood in the lobby, one hand in his coat pocket, watching her like he'd already won. As the doors closed, Brielle pulled out her phone and sent one text. "He's headed to Newark." Who was she warning? Noelle arrived at the service entrance, and Dylan Klein was already there. Clean suit, calm eyes, no mop in sight. He looked like someone who'd been waiting for this moment longer than she had. Noelle had built her marriage on observation, learning Caleb's patterns like a language she never wanted to speak. Now she stood across from someone who'd been observing Caleb even longer. Dylan said one sentence that changed everything. "Your husband didn't build anything alone." The service hallway was warm from boiler pipes running through the walls, and the air tasted dusty, like old paper and metal left too long in the dark. Noelle's throat tightened, not from fear, but recognition. She'd suspected pieces of the truth, but hearing it spoken out loud made it real. "Then who did he build it with?" she asked. Dylan shook his head. "Not here. Not in the open." He insisted on rules. A car ride, no phones, no recording, no detours. If Noelle trusted him, she'd gain the truth. If she refused, she'd stay one step behind Caleb's next move. Always reacting, never leading. "Caleb's already on his way to a warehouse outside Newark," Dylan said. "He thinks he's going to retrieve leverage. He's wrong." Time was moving without her permission. Dylan held the car door open, his hand briefly at her waist for balance as she stepped in. Professional, controlled, but it still landed like heat because touch always felt different when someone knew how to use it deliberately. Noelle got in, even though every instinct told her not to trust men with secrets. Before he closed the door, Dylan looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "I need to know something first," he said. "What? Did you ever love him? Or did you love what you hoped he would become?" Caleb walked into the Newark warehouse expecting a weapon and met a welcome committee that already knew his next 15 moves. The space was cold, dry, lit by a single buzzing fluorescent that made time feel jumpy and uneven. Dylan Klein stood at the center, no longer pretending to be invisible. He held a folder, thin, neat, organized, and presented it like evidence Caleb hadn't finished creating yet. Retaliation plans, lists of people to threaten, accounts to drain, stories to plant in press outlets that owed him favors. All of it documented before Caleb had even made the calls. His old strategy had always worked. Strike first, scare people into silence by cooperation with money or fear. But paperwork didn't scare. Paperwork just sat there, patient and permanent, waiting to outlive him. Caleb's anger cracked into something colder. "Who are you working for?" Dylan didn't answer. Names don't matter. Proof does. The stakes were clear. This wasn't just prison. It was erasure. Caleb would be removed from the world he built, replaced like a tenant who stopped paying rent. His name would be scrubbed from plaques, his deals reassigned, his legacy rewritten by people who never liked him in the first place. "Sign this acknowledgement now," Dylan said, sliding a single page across the table. "Or the file goes public before sunrise." A flashback sliced through Caleb's mind. Noelle against the wall in their Greenwich bedroom, his hands pinning her wrists, thinking desire meant ownership. He'd believed he owned her attention, her body, her future. Now he realized he'd never owned anything. Dylan offered a different punishment. A one-way ticket to a remote West Virginia town. A cashier job at a grocery store. No assistance, no spotlight, no leverage to climb back. Disappear quietly or burn loudly. Comment: would you take the ticket or gamble on court? Caleb reached for the pen, hand hovering, pride fighting calculation. He asked the one question that scared him most. "If you can do this, what else did she hide from me?" Caleb's hand shook over the pen while strangers calmly described his next month like they'd already watched it happen. They listed details, apartment number, shift schedule, supervisor name, bus route, speaking with the kind of certainty that made his skin crawl. His identity had always been built on being untouchable. The man people moved aside for in hallways, the name that opened doors before he knocked. Now these people were offering him a uniform and a name tag. The offer stood clear. West Virginia, cashier job, vanish quietly, or face a public legal storm that would turn his life into evidence. No middle ground, no negotiation room. The warehouse air was dry, making his throat feel tight. The paper under his hand felt warm, like someone else had just been holding it, planning this moment before he arrived. Everything about this felt designed. Caleb's pride surged first, the refusal rising in his chest like fire, then collapsed into cold calculation. If he signed, he lost his status forever. If he refused, he lost everything loudly, publicly, permanently. He tried bargaining anyway, because that's what he'd always done. "I'll need time to." "Sign now," Dylan interrupted. One term, no discussion. "Before sunrise," another voice repeated from the shadows. The phrase landed like a trigger, marking the deadline with finality. Caleb's mind flashed to Noelle in their Greenwich bedroom, the way she used to turn her face away after they were close, like she was keeping a part of herself locked away for later. He'd thought she was being cold. Now he realized she'd been storing pieces of herself somewhere he couldn't touch, building an exit he never saw coming. He reached for the pen, fingers clumsy. Not because he was sorry, he wasn't, but because he was cornered, and cornered men either fight or fold, and fighting required weapons he no longer had. The signature came out messy, nothing like the confident slash he used on contracts that moved millions. This looked like defeat in ink. As he set the pen down, Dylan stepped closer, voice quiet enough that only Caleb could hear. "You still don't know what you married into." The words hung in the cold air. Caleb looked up, searching Dylan's face for meaning, finding nothing but calm certainty. What did that mean? Who was Noelle before she became his wife? What kind of power had he been sleeping next to, underestimating, dismissing as quiet and manageable? The folder closed. Someone handed him an envelope, bus ticket, apartment key, first week's cash in small bills. Everything he needed to disappear, packaged like charity. Caleb walked out of the warehouse into the early morning cold, feeling smaller than when he entered. His phone was gone. They'd taken it before he signed, removing his last connection to the world he used to control. A car waited to drive him to the bus station. No driver he recognized, no leather seats, no control over the destination. Just a ride to nowhere, paid for by people who wanted him gone. He got in. The door closed with a sound that felt final. As the car pulled away, Caleb replayed Dylan's last line over and over, trying to decode it. What you married into, not who. Into. Like Noelle wasn't just a person but a doorway to something bigger, older, more dangerous than a CEO with a temper and a checkbook. Noelle sat across from people who greeted her like family, even though she'd never seen their faces before. They smiled with familiarity, called her by her first name, gestured to the chair like she'd been there before. Her whole life had been self-made. At least that's what the story said. No family money, no connections, just hard work and smart choices. That narrative had always felt clean, safe, hers. A sealed folder slid across the table, thick with documents. Birth records with names she didn't recognize. Amended paperwork showing changes made when she was too young to remember. Bank statements proving money came from somewhere she'd never been told about. The private Manhattan office smelled like cedar and clean coffee, the kind of expensive space where silence felt trained instead of natural. Every surface was polished, every corner controlled. Noelle fought nausea and rage at the same time, her stomach twisting while her chest burned. Her privacy had never been private. Her independence had been funded by people who never asked permission to be part of her story. Why was I pushed toward Caleb? She asked, voice flat. The man across from her didn't deny it. You weren't pushed. You were placed. The difference landed hard. Pushed meant accident, coincidence, bad luck. Placed meant intention, design, control. If Noelle accepted this truth, her whole identity changed. Every choice she thought she made alone suddenly had fingerprints on it. If she rejected it, she lost the leverage that could keep Caleb from striking back. Caleb's retaliation machine was already moving, even from West Virginia. She could feel it, the calls being made, the stories being planted, the attempt to rebuild power from rubble. Dylan stood behind her chair, close enough that his breath brushed her hair once when he shifted. The closeness was controlled, deliberate, and it made her pulse jump anyway because touch always meant something, even when it tried not to. No more secrets, Noelle said, looking at the strangers who claimed to know her. Not from my side. If we're doing this, I need everything. They nodded, like they'd expected her to ask. The folder opened wider. Inside was a photo of young Noelle, maybe 6 years old, holding a man's hand. The man's face was marked out, scratched, scribbled over with black ink until his features disappeared. But his ring was visible, clear, unmistakable. A signet ring that matched the firm's symbol. Who erased him? Noelle asked, finger hovering over the ruined face. The man across from her smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You did. When you were 7. We thought you'd forgotten. The room tilted. Noelle gripped the table edge, trying to remember a childhood that suddenly felt less like memory and more like a story someone told her until she believed it. Brielle met Logan in a quiet restaurant and realized halfway through her drink that she hadn't traded lovers. She'd traded sides. The shift happened so smoothly she almost missed it, like stepping from one room into another through a door she didn't see open. Her survival skill had always been reading power shifts early, knowing when to move before the ground gave out. She'd survived 3 corporate collapses, 2 affairs with married executives, and 1 near scandal that could have buried her. She knew how to jump. Logan offered protection and money, but he wanted one thing first: proof that Caleb's funding was never clean. Documents showing where the money really came from, who owned the debt, why a man who looked untouchable had strings attached. The restaurant playlist was soft, designed to make conversations feel private even in public. Brielle's fingers tapped her glass like a countdown. Nervous energy she couldn't hide. Relief hit first. Someone was offering her a way out. Then shame followed, the kind she refused to name out loud because naming it made it real. She'd spent years close to Caleb, learning his routines, adjusting his ties, pretending loyalty meant something. Now she was selling him for a plane ticket and a promise. The problem was simple. Brielle knew too much to be safe, but too little to be respected. She was dangerous in the wrong way, not powerful enough to protect herself, not quiet enough to be ignored. If she cooperated, she stayed alive. If she hesitated, she became disposable, another assistant who got too close and knew too much. Logan leaned forward, voice dropping. Someone else is already buying your story. You need to decide whose version you want told. His knee brushed hers under the table, brief, deliberate. She didn't move away, even though her stomach tightened. Power felt physical with Logan, like proximity carried weight. She recognized the feeling because she'd felt it with Caleb too, before everything collapsed. Brielle reached into her bag and pulled out a small drive. Everything Logan needed was there: wire transfers, coded emails, calendar entries that didn't match public statements. She'd been copying files for months. Insurance she hoped she'd never use. She slid it across the table. Logan pocketed it without looking, like he'd already known she'd brought it. Comment your guess. Does Brielle survive this choice, or does she get used up next? As Brielle left the restaurant, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One line. You just sold the wrong man's secrets. Her breath caught. She turned, scanning the street, looking for whoever was watching. No one stood out. No one looked her way. Who was texting her? And how did they know what she just did? Caleb scanned groceries while a customer complained about expired coupons. And for the first time in his life, his anger had nowhere to land. He couldn't fire her, couldn't have her removed, couldn't call someone to make the problem disappear. He just had to smile and call the manager. No assistance. No lobby applause. No staff too scared to meet his eyes. Just a name tag that said Caleb in block letters and a vest that smelled like someone else's sweat. A local woman came through his line, mid-40s, kind eyes that turned sharp when she looked at him. I know you, she said, smiling like she was holding a knife without showing the blade. Caleb's stomach dropped. I don't think. Business headline, she interrupted. Couple years back. You looked happier then. She paid in exact change and left. The interaction lasted 30 seconds but felt like exposure. The store's floor cleaner stung his nose, sharp and chemical. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, pressing into his skull like a headache he couldn't escape. Every shift felt the same: scan, bag, repeat until time stopped meaning anything. Humiliation burned into something colder. A vow. He would return to power. This wasn't permanent. Couldn't be. He tried making calls during his break, using the store's payphone like it was 1995. Every number he valued went dead. Disconnected, blocked, rerouted to strangers who claimed they'd never heard of him. If he stayed quiet, he kept his freedom. If he fought back, he triggered the file Dylan showed him, the one that could erase him completely. A postcard arrived at his apartment. No return address, 2 words written in block print. Still watching. Caleb's loneliness turned bodily. Restless nights, sheets tangled. His mind replaying Noelle's silence like rejection he couldn't argue with. He remembered her touch, her voice, the way she used to look at him before everything soured. The memories felt like ghosts. He wrote a letter to Noelle anyway. Not an apology, he wasn't ready for that, but an attempt to pull her back into conversation, to prove he still existed in her world. Before he sealed it, his phone buzzed. One time, blocked number. He stared at the screen, confused. He wasn't supposed to have service here. They'd taken his phone, given him a basic model with no contacts, no apps, nothing. How was anyone reaching him? Noelle walked into a private clinic under a different name, and Dylan realized she was hiding something even from him. He'd driven her there, waited outside, watched her sign in with a name that wasn't hers. She was rebuilding her life quietly, staying out of headlines while the public assumed she'd vanished into money and silence. But this was different. The doctor asked one question that made Noelle go completely still. When was your last contact with your ex-husband? The waiting room chair stuck to the back of her legs, plastic warm from bodies before hers. The air smelled faintly of latex and antiseptic, clinical and cold. Fear hit first, then control. Noelle chose her face carefully, smoothing her expression into something neutral before she answered. Dylan confronted her outside, voice low, eyes locked on hers. What are you hiding? Noelle refused to explain in public. Too many people, too many cameras, too much risk. If Noelle was pregnant, the entire war changed. A child meant leverage, access, custody battles that would drag on for years. If she wasn't, someone still wanted Dylan to believe she was, which meant someone was playing a different game. Her attorney's text came through mid-argument. Emergency hearing request filed. He's trying something from West Virginia. Caleb wasn't done. Even from a grocery store in the middle of nowhere, he was still fighting. Noelle and Dylan argued close. Too close. Voices low, eyes locked, heat building in the space between them. The tension was real, and it scared them both because it showed up during danger instead of safety, when they should have been focused on survival instead of each other. Noelle grabbed Dylan's arm, pulling him toward a parked car just to get privacy. Her hand caught his jaw for 1 second, steadying, claiming, then dropped like the touch burned. Inside the car, she finally spoke. I need you to stop asking questions I can't answer yet. Why not? Because I don't know who's listening. Would you tell Dylan the truth right now? Or wait until you're sure it's safe? Comment your choice. Noelle took a breath, then said the one word she'd been holding back, the twins. Then she stopped. Dylan stared at her. Twins. Why did she say twins? Noelle's attorney rushed her into a back office and said, he filed again. Different county, different angle, same goal. The words came fast, like she'd been rehearsing them on the drive over. Noelle had been trying to stay invisible while her new reality found solid ground. No headlines, no sightings, no public statements. Just quiet days rebuilding what Caleb tried to burn. But quiet didn't mean safe. Caleb's filing claimed she manipulated assets and was a flight risk, legal language designed to drag her into court and force her to speak under oath about things she wasn't ready to disclose. He wanted her exposed, cornered, vulnerable. Winter air bit outside the courthouse, sharp enough to make her eyes water. Her scarf still smelled like her perfume from earlier that morning, too normal, too ordinary for what was about to happen. The contrast felt wrong. Noelle's heartbeat spiked, hammering against her ribs, but her voice stayed flat when she answered. When does it start? Hours. Maybe less. The judge granted a short window for emergency motions, which meant Caleb's side would push hard, asking questions designed to make her slip, to make her look guilty or unstable or both. If Noelle spoke wrong, her private leverage became public ammunition. If she stayed silent, she risked looking like someone with something to hide. There was no safe answer, only better versions of damage. Dylan adjusted her coat collar before they entered the building, fingers brushing the fabric near her neck. The touch was brief, professional, necessary, and her breath caught anyway. She hated needing the steadiness he offered, and she wanted it at the same time, two feelings pulling opposite directions. You don't have to go in, Dylan said quietly. Yes, I do. Noelle's voice was calm, decided. Disappearing would feed his story. He'd say I ran because I'm guilty. Dylan nodded once, understanding without arguing. They walked through security, past reporters who didn't know her face yet but would soon, into the courthouse that smelled like old wood and too many bodies in winter coats. The air inside felt thick, harder to breathe. Noelle kept her face neutral, her steps even, her hands loose at her sides instead of clenched. Every movement was a choice, every expression a defense. As they rounded the corner toward the courtroom, Noelle saw her. Brielle, sitting 3 rows back, next to Logan, dressed like someone attending a funeral or a trial that would decide more than one person's fate. Noelle stopped walking. Dylan noticed immediately. What is she doing here? Noelle asked, voice barely above a whisper. Brielle's presence made no sense. This hearing could bury Caleb further, strip away whatever dignity he had left, and Brielle had already chosen Logan's side. So why show up to watch the man she betrayed lose again? Unless she wasn't here to watch Caleb lose. Unless she was here for something else entirely. Dylan's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the room like he was calculating threats. She's making a move. What kind of move? The kind that changes who wins. Why would Brielle show up to a hearing that could bury Caleb? Brielle slipped Noelle a folded note during a hallway pass, their hands brushing for half a second. The paper felt warm, already read, already decided. Noelle opened it in the restroom, away from cameras and watching eyes. I can end him, but I need protection from the people behind him. Brielle had always survived by attaching herself to power, moving from one orbit to another before the last one collapsed. She was good at reading shifts, knowing when to stay and when to jump. This was her jumping. When they met again in the courthouse hallway, Brielle spoke quickly, voice low. She offered a sworn statement about Caleb's hidden accounts, the early financing pipeline that never appeared on public records, the names behind the money. The hallway smelled like wet wool coats and coffee from the vending machine near the elevators. Shoes squeaked on polished stone floors, echoing too loud in the narrow space. Everything felt exposed. Noelle felt disgust first. Brielle's opportunism was so naked, so obvious. But then another thought landed. Opportunism could still be useful. Brielle had access to proof Noelle didn't. The truth didn't care who delivered it. Why should I trust you? Noelle asked. You shouldn't. Brielle's honesty was almost refreshing. But you can use me. If Noelle accepted Brielle's help, she became tied to Brielle's credibility, and Brielle's credibility was shaky at best. If she refused, she might lose the cleanest proof available, evidence that could shut Caleb down permanently. Brielle had a flight that night, packed bags already waiting in a hotel room she checked into under a different name. She wanted a deal before she boarded, protection before she testified, insurance before she became disposable. Across the hallway, Logan watched Brielle like he owned her. His gaze was possessive, calculating, the look of someone who'd already decided what she was worth. Brielle noticed and leaned into it, using the heat between them as a shield, letting him think control meant loyalty. One condition, Noelle said. You tell the truth in front of counsel, not in whispers. On record, under oath, where lying costs you everything. Brielle hesitated, then nodded. Deal. They walked into a small conference room where Noelle's attorney waited with recording equipment already set up. Brielle sat, adjusted the mic, and started talking. She named the investment firm out loud, clear, unmistakable, the kind of name that carried weight in rooms where decisions got made. Dylan, standing near the door, flinched. Just once, barely visible, but Noelle caught it. Why would Dylan react like he knew them personally? Dylan admitted one thing he never planned to. Caleb wasn't the only one being managed. He'd looked untouchable until that moment, like someone who moved through chaos without getting marked by it. Now the cracks showed. Inside his car, the heater blasted hot air that didn't reach Noelle's hands. They stayed cold, fingers numb, like her body knew something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. Dylan told her what Brielle's testimony revealed. He'd been placed near Caleb years ago, not by accident or coincidence, but as a control mechanism. Someone wanted eyes on Caleb, someone wanted records kept, and Dylan was the tool they used. Noelle felt betrayed, even though Dylan had helped her, even though he'd given her information that kept her alive. Betrayal didn't follow logic, it followed trust, and trust was breaking. Was my marriage a setup? Her voice stayed level, but her chest felt tight. Dylan refused to lie. He also refused to fully confess. Parts of it were. I don't know which parts. That answer was worse than yes or no. It meant Noelle couldn't even trust her own memories, couldn't separate what was real from what was designed. If Dylan was compromised, Noelle's entire safety plan collapsed. Every move she made with his help suddenly looked suspect. If Dylan was honest, if he was risking his life by telling her this, then he was in as much danger as she was. The firm wanted closure tonight. Either Noelle cooperated and played her role quietly, or they'd clean the mess, and cleaning meant making people disappear from headlines, from records, from breathing. Frustration boiled over. Noelle grabbed Dylan's coat front, pulling him close enough to see every detail of his face. Anger turned into something hotter for 1 second. Heat that had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with being too close, too desperate, too human. Then she let go like the contact burned. Dylan reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a burner phone, plain and anonymous. If it rings, don't hesitate. Just answer and do what they say. Who's calling? The only person who can stop this. The burner rang immediately, vibrating in Noelle's palm before she could process what was happening. She answered. The voice on the other end said her full birth name, the one from the amended documents, the one almost no one knew. Who else knew it? Caleb received his own letter back in the mail. Opened, read, returned like junk mail nobody wanted. The envelope had been slit cleanly, the pages inside refolded wrong. Proof that someone examined every word before deciding he wasn't worth answering. His isolation wasn't accidental. It was curated, designed, maintained by people who wanted him forgotten but not free. His small-town life had become a cage made of routine and shame. Same shifts, same customers, same fluorescent lights pressing down until time stopped meaning anything. He was breathing, working, existing, but not living. Then someone made an offer. The man appeared during Caleb's break, sitting in the store's back lot near the dumpsters like he'd been waiting. He didn't introduce himself, didn't waste time on small talk. Just one sentence. You want a way back? Hope hit Caleb like a drug, fast and overwhelming. Then rage fueled it, turning hope into something sharp and useful. The gas station TV near the register played business news on mute, closed captions scrolling across the bottom. Caleb's face appeared in an old clip, blurred, pixelated, already halfway erased like he was a ghost someone remembered incorrectly. The offer was simple. Expose Noelle, flip the narrative, testify against the firm's interests. Tell the court she manipulated everything, that the marriage was her plan, that Caleb was the victim of a woman who played roles better than she played wife. Dangerous, even for him. The firm didn't forgive betrayal, and testifying meant painting a target on his back that no grocery vest could hide. If he talked, he might get power back and lose his life. If he stayed quiet, he stayed invisible forever, scanning coupons until his hands forgot what signing contracts felt like. You have 24 hours to choose, the man said, then left without waiting for an answer. That night, a local woman came into the store. Younger, tired, flirting with him in a way that felt transactional. She asked questions about where he came from, what he used to do, whether he missed it. Caleb wanted the attention and hated himself for wanting it, because it felt like replacing Noelle with noise, filling silence with something that didn't matter. He sent her away. Later, in his apartment, Caleb used a smuggled phone the man had slipped into his coat pocket. He dialed his old counsel's number, the one he'd memorized years ago for emergencies. The call connected. No voicemail, no assistant, just a voice, calm and patient. We've been waiting, the voice said. Who was we? Noelle found the envelope slipped under her apartment door. No stamp, no return address, just her name and address written in perfect block letters. Someone had been here, close enough to touch her door, and she never heard them. She'd been trying to keep the pregnancy private, hidden from headlines and court filings and anyone who could use it against her. Privacy felt like the only protection left. The envelope contained clinic details only her doctor should know. Appointment times, test results, the exact date she found out. At the bottom, one line in the same block letters. A father has rights. Her apartment radiator clicked, the sound sharp in the silence. Felt like footsteps, like someone moving through rooms they shouldn't be in. Noelle's breath went shallow, her hands moving instinctively to her belly. Fear turned physical. Tight chest, cold fingers, heart beating too fast. She couldn't tell if the threat came from Caleb, the firm, or someone inside the clinic who sold information for cash. Any of them could have done this. All of them had reasons. If the pregnancy became public, she became a target. Custody battles, paternity claims, headlines about the CEO's secret babies. Every move she made would be analyzed, judged, weaponized. If she ran, she confirmed she was hiding something, and running made her look guilty. Her phone buzzed. Dylan. Changing the meeting location for the second time in 10 minutes. She had 1 hour. After that, the security plan reset and she'd be moving blind. Noelle grabbed her coat and left, locking the door behind her even though locks didn't seem to matter anymore. Dylan pulled her into a doorway halfway down the block, bodies pressing close as a stranger walked past. The closeness hit harder because she was pregnant and terrified, and he was trying not to show how much he cared. His hands stayed at her back, steadying, protective. "We should cancel," Dylan said. "No." Noelle's voice was firm. "I'm done reacting. I'm setting the meeting this time, my rules, my location." She was baiting whoever sent the envelope, forcing them into the open where she could see their face. Comment. Is the threat coming from Caleb, Brielle, or the firm? That evening, Noelle's phone buzzed with a voicemail. She didn't recognize the number, but she recognized the voice immediately. Caleb. He said her nickname from Austin, the one only he used, the one she'd never told anyone else. His voice was soft, familiar, dangerous. How did he get that detail? Noelle walked into a public place she chose on purpose, wearing a mic that wasn't turned on. This wasn't for court, wasn't for evidence, this was for control. She'd spent weeks reacting to threats, dodging moves she didn't see coming. Now she was setting the board. The voicemail with Caleb's Austin nickname got traced back to a relay that shouldn't exist. Encrypted, rerouted through servers in 3 countries, meaning someone with resources gave him access. Someone wanted her scared enough to make mistakes. Steam from a street cart hit her face as she walked past, the smell of onions making her stomach flip. She hated that her body was betraying her calm, turning pregnancy into a weakness she couldn't hide. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, then dropped. Not here, not where anyone could see. Fear for the twins came first, sharp and immediate. Then something colder settled in, focus that pushed emotion aside and left only strategy. Dylan had wanted to cancel, his voice tight when he argued with her outside her apartment. "This is reckless." "No," Noelle said. "Reckless is waiting for them to make the next move. I need to see who shows up." If the wrong person learned about the pregnancy, she became leverage in a game she couldn't win. If the right person learned, she gained an ally with reach, someone who could push back against the firm's control. The risk was calculated. The meeting window was 10 minutes. After that, her security plan reset, locations changed, and whoever was hunting her would have to start over. Dylan checked her coat before she left his side, fingers grazing her ribs as he searched for a wire she wasn't wearing. She swallowed hard, not from attraction, but from the intimacy of being handled gently during danger. His touch was professional, careful, and it still landed like something more because she was terrified and he was the only person she trusted. 10 minutes, Dylan reminded her. "If anything feels wrong, I leave," Noelle finished. "I know." She stepped out of his protection and walked across the street alone, into a coffee shop with large windows and too many witnesses for violence. She ordered nothing, just sat at a table near the back where she could see the door. 2 minutes passed, then 5. 7 minutes, someone sat down across from her. Older man, gray suit, calm face. Not someone she recognized, but someone who looked at her like he'd been waiting years for this conversation. "I knew your mother," he said. The line landed like a threat. Not because of the words, but because of what they meant. Her mother had died when Noelle was 5, too young to remember clearly, too young to ask the right questions. Her past had always been sealed, protected, kept quiet by people who said it was for her own good. Now someone was unsealing it. Noelle forced her face to stay neutral, her hands to stay still on the table. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "Someone who's been keeping you safe longer than you know. And someone who needs you to stop running before you ruin everything." "Who is this, and why does that line land like a threat?" The stranger slid a photo across the table. Noelle as a child, maybe 4 years old, holding a man's hand. The man's face was blurred in the photo, but his ring was sharp and clear. A signet ring that matched the firm's symbol exactly. Noelle had always believed her life started from scratch. Self-made, no family money, no connections, just work and choices and luck. Now her past had receipts she'd never seen. The stranger spoke calmly, like he was explaining something simple. The firm financed Caleb not to build him up, but to keep him obedient. And your marriage was the lock on the door. The table vibrated faintly whenever the subway passed beneath the street, a rumble that felt like a warning under her elbows. Noelle gripped the edge, steadying herself against the information that kept reshaping her life. Rage hit hot, consuming, because her love story had been treated like a transaction by people who never asked permission. Every moment she thought was hers, the Austin gala, the proposal, the wedding, suddenly had fingerprints on it. Dylan appeared at the door. The stranger looked up and smiled. "Hello, Marcus." Marcus, not Dylan. The name landed wrong, proved that Dylan wasn't fully Dylan, that even the person helping her had been playing a role. Noelle's breath caught, but she didn't look away from the stranger. "What do you want?" "Cooperation," the stranger said. "The firm owns Caleb's debt, and now they're claiming parental rights through a legal loophole you won't win against. If you expose them, you risk chaos around the twins. If you keep quiet, you become owned by silence." The deadline came fast. "Tonight, we close this. You can walk away clean, or you can fight and lose everything, including them." Noelle grabbed Dylan's, Marcus's, hand under the table. Tight, possessive, not tender. She needed his loyalty made physical, needed to know he was still on her side even if his name was a lie. He squeezed back once. It wasn't much, but it was something. Noelle made a choice. Not the one the stranger expected. "You want a sacrifice?" she asked. "I'll give you one, but not the one you're asking for." The stranger's smile faded. "What are you offering?" "Caleb," Noelle said. "Publicly. I'll testify that he manipulated assets, hid money, planned retaliation. I'll give you everything you need to bury him permanently. But the twins stay mine. No firm, no custody claims, no legal games." The stranger considered this, weighing the value of her offer against what he'd lose. Dylan, Marcus, leaned close and whispered, "Brielle's in danger." Noelle's chest tightened. Brielle knew something that could destroy everyone, including the firm. If they silenced her before Noelle could act, the leverage disappeared. Time was running out. Brielle recorded a message with shaking hands, then deleted it, then recorded it again. The truth could get her killed twice. Once by enemies who wanted her quiet, once by allies who wanted her disposable. She'd always traded closeness for safety, attaching herself to powerful men and moving before the ground gave out. Now closeness was the trap. Logan wasn't protecting her. He was collecting her, packaging her testimony for the firm in exchange for a payout she'd never see. The hotel ice bucket rattled when she bumped the table, the sound too loud in a room full of expensive quiet. Everything felt amplified. Her breathing, her heartbeat, the clock ticking toward a decision she couldn't take back. Panic came first. Then something unexpected, grief. She remembered the first time she ever felt chosen. Back when Caleb still pretended loyalty mattered and she still believed proximity to power meant safety. It had been a lie, but it had felt real, and losing that illusion hurt more than she wanted to admit. Brielle tried calling Noelle. The call routed to the burner Dylan had given Noelle weeks ago. Proof he'd built this emergency line long before either of them knew they'd need it. If Brielle spoke, she became a target. If she stayed silent, she became evidence someone else controlled. A body with a story already written for her. Logan's text came through, "Lobby. 2 minutes." His earlier touch replayed in her mind. His hand on her lower back that felt like ownership, fingers pressing just hard enough to remind her who held the power. She recognized the feeling now and hated that it had worked. Hated that she'd leaned into it because fear made her willing to trade anything for safety. Brielle made her choice. She opened her laptop, attached a single file, and typed one sentence in the email to Noelle. "He's not their only father." The file contained DNA results. Tests Caleb never knew were taken. Results that proved the twins' paternity was more complicated than biology. The firm had samples, records, legal claims already drafted. They'd been planning this since before Noelle knew she was pregnant. Brielle hit send. Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and opened the door. Logan stood in the hallway. But he wasn't alone. 2 men flanked him, security, muscle, the kind of presence that didn't ask questions. Logan's face was calm, apologetic, final. "I'm sorry," he said. "They made a better offer." Who came with him, and what does the firm plan to do with Brielle now? Back in Manhattan, cameras flashed again. Another hearing, another courtroom, another chance for the story to change. Caleb appeared by video from West Virginia, his face smaller on the screen, his presence diminished by distance and defeat. Noelle walked in looking finished with fear. This time, she wasn't the quiet wife waiting for permission to speak. She was the person holding the frame, setting the terms, deciding who got to tell the story. Noelle's attorney stood and introduced a new exhibit sourced from Brielle's file. Proof that Caleb's retaliation plans were documented before he executed them. Emails drafted but not sent. Lists compiled in advance. Evidence that his cruelty wasn't reactive, it was planned. The courtroom air was dry, sucking moisture from her mouth. Noelle's tongue stuck to her teeth when she breathed, but she kept her face calm. On the screen, Caleb's face shifted. Not guilt, not remorse, just recognition. His old tricks no longer worked. The intimidation, the smooth explanations, the ability to make her doubt what she saw. All of it was gone. He tried to speak over her, voice rising through the video feed. The judge shut him down with one sentence. "Mr. Mercer, you'll have your turn." The silence that followed was louder than his voice ever was. If Noelle went too far, she'd trigger the firm's cleanup protocol. People would disappear, records would vanish, and the truth would get buried under lawyers and money. If she held back, Caleb would regain room to manipulate, to twist the narrative, to make himself the victim. The judge looked at Noelle. "You have one statement before we adjourn." Dylan stood behind her, close enough that she felt his breath when she inhaled. The steadiness of his presence became a private vow. Whatever happened next, she wasn't alone. Noelle stood. She didn't speak to Caleb. She addressed the room, but her words were aimed at the firm, signaling she understood the game and was willing to play it. "I'm not here to bury my ex-husband," Noelle said. "I'm here to protect my children from becoming pieces in someone else's strategy. If that requires cooperation, I'll cooperate. If it requires exposure, I'll expose everything. The choice isn't mine alone anymore." The judge called recess. Noelle's phone buzzed immediately. One text, unknown number. "Proof of paternity is already filed." Who filed it, and why now, when Noelle was finally taking control? Noelle stood in the nursery she hadn't shown anyone, hand on her belly, and realized the final battle wasn't in court. It was about access. Who got to be near the twins, who got to shape their lives, who got to claim them. The twins would be born into power games unless Noelle ended those games first. Dylan, Marcus, whatever his real name was, stood in the doorway and told her what Brielle's message meant. "Caleb is the biological father," he said quietly. "But the firm is positioning themselves as the legal father. They can manufacture paperwork faster than they can manufacture mercy." The nightlight hummed softly in the corner, casting shadows that looked too big for the small room. Noelle tasted iron in her mouth from stress, from grinding her teeth, from holding everything in too long. She broke. One quiet tear slid down her face before she stopped herself, wiping it away with the back of her hand. She refused to give anyone more of her than she chose. Not Caleb, not the firm, not even her own fear. Two messages arrived within minutes of each other. "Caleb, from West Virginia. Please let me meet them. I know I don't deserve it, but they're mine too." The firm, through an attorney. "Custody arrangements require discussion. We have legal standing." Both messages were about ownership, not love. Both wanted access to the twins for reasons that had nothing to do with what was best for two children who hadn't even been born yet. If Noelle let Caleb in, she risked repeating the cycle, teaching her children that cruelty could be forgiven if someone apologized loud enough. If she shut him out completely, she became the villain in someone else's story, the bitter ex-wife who kept a father from his kids. Birth was close. Weeks, maybe days. Decisions became permanent fast. Dylan moved behind her, close enough to touch. His palms rested flat on her stomach for 1 second, asking permission with his stillness instead of words. Noelle nodded once, letting comfort exist without turning it into debt. His touch was tender, controlled, and it steadied her enough to make the final choice. Noelle sat at her laptop and typed the last email. Caleb Mercer is the biological father of my children. He will be listed on their birth certificates because that is the truth. But he will never have access to them. Not supervised, not limited, not someday when he's better. Because apology doesn't erase the years of control, manipulation, and fear. And because my children deserve to grow up without learning that love looks like ownership. She sent copies to her attorney, to the court, and to the firm. Then she turned to Dylan. Whatever your real name is, I need the truth now. All of it. He nodded. You'll have it. If you were Noelle, would you protect the twins by closing the door forever? Or would you allow one supervised visit? Comment your answer and subscribe for the next story. Noelle turned off the nursery light and said, almost to herself, some men lose everything and still think they're owed a child.